Good afternoon, everyone, and thank you for joining us for today's transformative leadership panel, Nurturing the Talent Pipeline, Best Practices from Academia to Students and Young Professionals and Beyond. I'm Michelle Dilley, CEO of Awesome, which stands for Achieving Women's Excellence in Supply Chain Operations, Management, and Education. And for those of you who are new to our community, Awesome is the leading professional organization for women in the supply chain industry, with a remarkable network of over 1,600 senior women leaders throughout the entire supply chain industry. In today's competitive landscape, the challenge of attracting talent has emerged as a pressing concern. I'm frequently approached by top executives who seek guidance on how to successfully navigate this intense talent war. With markets constantly evolving, securing the best talent is at the forefront of many leaders' minds, making today's discussion particularly relevant. Awesome's mission is to revolutionize the future of supply chain leadership. And we achieve this by hosting many different types of events like today's panel. So these virtual gatherings really offer senior leaders a platform to showcase their experience, for us to engage in what's most pressing on our minds and really have meaningful conversations about the current and emerging trends in our industry. Today, we'll delve into this crucial topic about attracting the next generation of supply chain talent. And as we were preparing for this event, we realized that this is just so much of a meaty topic, and there's so much material for us to cover that we couldn't just do it in 1 hour. So consider this session part one of an enriching series. In today's discussion, we'll focus on strategies for organization to establish robust talent pipelines through partnerships with universities, creating meaningful internships, and we're going to hear how young professionals are going to give us some advice on how they can be guided into making informed career decisions. Please mark your calendars for part two on Monday, October 21st at 12 p.m. Central Time. In that session, we'll delve deeper into retaining talent, an essential component of a talent strategy. Today, you'll gain valuable insights into attracting top performers. In part two, we'll explore strategies to keep them engaged and committed, ensuring a sustainable future for your organization. I hope you will join us for this enlightening continuation. So before we delve into today's conversation, I have just a few housekeeping notes. Please feel free to use the chat function to engage with the other panelists and other people participating in today's webinar. And please, please, please make sure that you submit any questions that you have for this panel through the Q&A feature. We'll address as many questions as possible during that portion of the session at the end of the program. And now, without further ado, let's begin. I'd like to first quickly introduce our panelists for today. So joining us, we have Dr. Stephanie Thomas, who is an associate professor at the University of Arkansas. So Stephanie, welcome and thank you for joining.
Thank you for having me, Michelle. Looking forward to it.
Excellent. Next up, we have Mary Long, who is a supply chain evangelist, and most currently, she's at the University of Tennessee working with the Global Supply Chain Institute. Mary has a tremendous background and experience with leading global organizations. Mary, thank you so much for being here.
I'm thrilled to be here. Hi, all.
Excellent. Thank you. And then next up, we have Reagan White, who is working at Nestle as a transportation specialist. So Reagan, thank you so much for joining us, and we look forward to hearing from you today.
Thanks, Michelle. Always good to be here with Awesome. Excited to be here with you all.
Excellent, thank you. And last but not least, we have Yalen Melendez. Yalen is at Target, and she is an environmental program owner. Yalen, thank you so much for joining us as well.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
So what I thought we would do to get started is kind of just do a level setting question. And I'd love to hear from each one of you about what you think are the best ways that a company can ensure that they're attracting top talent. Stephanie, I think I'll kick this off with you.
So I think one of the things that companies can do, because I think I'm 15 years in academia, now, and I see a lot of companies and I speak to a lot of students, and so I get to hear a lot about experiences with the recruitment side of things. And I feel like a lot of times companies are using kind of a shotgun approach to try to attract anybody anywhere, or they are too focused on a specific university or program. And I think it helps to take a step back and say, what is our talent strategy? So to start filling the pipeline, what are our goals? What are our needs? What are the skill sets that we need to have? And really have some honest conversation on what are we trying to get out of this to make sure that whatever you're doing meets the talent needs that you have.
Yeah, I think that's great advice. And I know we're going to talk a little bit more about that later. Mary, how about you? What are you seeing?
Yeah, I agree completely with what Stephanie said there. There's the whole classic saying of hope is not a strategy. And so just thinking, I think that I was more practitioner for 23 years, and like you get really busy and you tend to delegate things that, and I think that sometimes recruitment can be something that companies, even though they care a lot about it and the teams care a lot about the people that they hire, the recruitment piece to it can get delegated, and then the strategy gets lost. The link to their strategies gets lost. And so being more intentional about it helps. And then having more of a through line so that once you do bring people in, that they've got a role and that they help with that flywheel effect of continuing recruitment. So those are kind of two of the key things I would emphasize.
Excellent. Yeah, I'd love to hear a little bit more from you on your thoughts about, are companies recruiting for positions that they have, or are they creating bench strength so that they know that there's going to be attrition and then they've got that pipeline fed up and ready to go and fed?
Yeah.
What are you
Great
seeing
point.
with companies? Are they doing, recruit to hire for certain positions, or are they creating bench strength?
I think it depends. So as Stephanie and I both, we've talked, there are certain companies where they are building their brand awareness and they may not even have a current open role, but they're building the relationship with the universities, with the students themselves. And the best ambassadors for the company are really students who have had a successful interaction with that company, right? You rely and you trust more what your friend tells you about something than so that like through the grapevine interaction is really critically important, and the only way to get that is through a consistent presence.
Agreed totally, Mary. And I would also say that a lot of companies, going back to that strategy thing, will come in and do internships and then they don't hire for full time. So they've invested all this time and money into this talent, and then maybe the talent wants to stay, but they don't have a pathway to keep them there. And then some people don't do internships and then are trying to come in for full time, but maybe there's a lack of awareness because they haven't had friends, as Mary was talking about, to do it. The companies I think that are most successful are doing what Mary said. We start with a great summer internship, or even during the school year internship experience, get some great word of mouth, and then hire that person, assuming they had a great experience, into a full-time role. And then people see that, and it's just kind of this cycle that continues. The ones that are most effective, I think that are being the most conscientious of the money that they're putting into the recruitment, that's how they do it.
Excellent. Now I'd like to hear from our young professionals. So Reagan, why don't you tell me, what have you seen that are like really successful ways that that you've experienced of where they're attracting young talent, either with you and what attracted you, or friends or other colleagues that you work with?
Yeah, I have a few points here. I would say the first one is fairly administrative, which is that if you want to attract top talent, it's really key to start recruiting early. Your top students, they're gonna be interviewing, applying for roles pretty like quickly into the semester. So it's key that you don't necessarily wait until the end of the semester or early spring to start trying to recruit those individuals. The other thing that I would say too, through my experience and the experience of my colleagues, is some companies will also offer like shadowing opportunities where you can sit with someone that works at that organization for a day and really learn what does their role look like and what does the culture of the company look like at a glance to kind of determine whether you would be a good fit for that organization or if that's a company that you're interested in pursuing further. That's another option too. And then kind of the last thing I would say is when you're recruiting, like being very open about what your company's values are and what goals that you have as an organization. Those tend to be two very important things to top talent. We really want to know, what does a company care about and does it align with my personal values? And so the more upfront you are as a recruiter about that, the better chance you have of really connecting with those students that are a good fit for your organization.
Yeah, fit is so incredibly important. And one of the things that I've seen in the last, 10 years as young professionals are entering into the world is how much they are really paying attention to fit. Like, I'll just admit, back in the day when I was looking for a job, it was like, you know what? I just wanted a job, right? Like I was like, I just need to be gainfully employed. But now I appreciate the the deliberate approach that everyone is taking to make sure it's the right fit, because it really is so important on both sides, right? Like we know how expensive it is when you have to deal with a lot of turnover and brand reputation and all of that stuff. So everybody really thinking about fit on the front end, I think is smart. It's, time well spent, and it saves from a resource perspective down the road.
Well, Michelle, that's also saying you can't do the same things you did 10,
Right.
15, 20 years ago, and companies that are still trying to recruit the same way are going to struggle.
Absolutely. Yeah. Great point. And Yalen.
No, I completely agree. I think you also have to practice what you preach. Like if you're a company that advertises on being super fun and having this culture, you need to, like Mary said, have team members be able to speak to that, because that is what's going to retain your top talent. And with that, I think one of the most important aspects of recruiting is making sure that that growth pipeline that you want, that you have available at your company is crystal clear. So you need to make sure that you're talking to your interns and you showcase, these are our networking programs, these are our connection programs. Have those available, have mentor circles for those interns, have people from different parts of the company be involved in those intern programs or projects. So that way they're not just interacting with the team that's, that they're working with, but they're also learning about other departments, other sectors of the business. And you might have someone say, hey, I started off in your role. This is how I got here. And so you have to make sure that you're showcasing examples of success, and you're also showcasing like how that's possible, and make sure those resources, development plans, career development conversations are normalized within the company culture.
And I'd love to hear your thoughts on how and the frequency for those conversations, right? Because,
Yeah.
I think that that's shifting too. I think that that trend is changing about how do people want to get feedback? What's the cadence? What's the frequency? What's the mechanism? Like, I would love to hear both you and Reagan, your thoughts around that.
It definitely depends on the person and what that person's career goals, aspirations are, and the kind of leader you have as well. But I think within your company, if you have someone who's really driven, really talented, and has these goals, they're going to find those conversations and that feedback, whether it's internally or externally. So making sure that you're listening, and you're paying attention and watching those key players, and making sure that you're not feeding them, that's not the right word, but you're developing them, and meeting them where they are.
Excellent. And Reagan, what about you? What do you think about that?
Yeah, I mean, I agree a lot with what Yalen said. I think with top, performers, naturally they're probably going to seek out feedback. So that's probably not going to be the issue of them wanting feedback. It's if you're a people leader of top performers in your organization, making sure that you can actually give them tangible feedback that they can
Mhm.
act on is almost the more important piece, in my opinion. Everyone loves to hear that they're doing a great job. That's always nice. But if you're really someone that's striving to be your best self and improve, you're also wanting to know, like, where are my weak spots that I can grow in, because everybody has something that they can grow in more. And so I think from the leadership side, it's really key to make sure that your people managers over those individuals are very in tune with what their weaknesses and their strengths of their top performers are, and giving them tangible feedback for that.
Great point. Excellent. So when we were prepping for this, there was a term that was used about exploding offers. So right now, there's a trend about exploding offers. So Stephanie, maybe can you start off with what does that mean? And then what are your thoughts on this and how effective are they?
So an exploding offer is basically when you don't give a lot of time to accept the offer. So maybe it's a day or 2 days, maybe a week. And so you're forcing that decision very quickly. And a lot of times this is coming out of summer internships where students are, here's an offer. We've had you for the summer. We want to lock you in for your senior year. Here's an offer. You've got like 3 days to make a decision. I understand why companies do that, because then they have an immediate feedback on, okay, this is how many I've got versus how many roles I need. So I know how many I can now go out and seek to fill when I'm going to career fairs or universities in some form or fashion. I can tell you on the student side, it induces a lot of stress. And
Mhm.
what I think has happened more is you force a decision very quickly at a time that they're trying to figure out a lot of stuff about becoming an adult. And when they make that decision quickly, sometimes they will have buyer's remorse. And then that is when you may see some people that will renege on job offers. And I will tell you, most faculty and staff I know at universities across the country are very much against that. It doesn't mean it doesn't happen. Or you get people who feel locked in, and then they start off and they're not really in a happy place. And a lot of times they're going to move a lot faster. And so I think there's a lot of, if you're looking at, we've got basically 9 months, 10 months until somebody would start, you can give them a few more weeks to figure something out so that they feel better about that opportunity, and you're going to get the best them when they set foot in your organization. What I think is a best practice from some companies that I've seen is they will give maybe a month to 3 months to accept that offer. And maybe there's a little financial incentive that if you accept earlier, you get a little bigger signing bonus or something, but that also gives the student time to explore other opportunities and decide, is this the best fit for me? And it doesn't, I think, impact companies too bad on the flip side of actually the recruiting side of it. And I think in the long term that it ensures you're getting people that want to be there as they're moving forward.
That's great. Thanks for sharing that best practice. And Reagan, I know when we were talking about this, you were like, I didn't know that was the term, but it happened to me. So maybe share your thoughts on it too.
Yes, yeah. I was glad to learn something new through this experience. I had definitely not heard of that terminology, so might be a little bit behind the times there. But yeah, so I actually did have an exploding offer. I did accept my exploding offer. I did not have 3 days. I had a week, so maybe, that's a bit more time than most people who got exploding offers, but I would still say it was pretty tight in terms of having to really weigh out the decision, especially because mine kind of included a cross country move as well. So I really had to think through from the professional and personal standpoint, is this, what I felt like was the right decision for me? But it helped me really hone in on my decision-making skills. So I wrote my pros and cons list. Ultimately, like I felt like the pros weighed out for the cons of the short timeline for me. But I will say, to Stephanie's point, like it definitely was not the most relaxing experience. I will say, just to kind of play like devil's advocate here, it was I got my exploding offer like the day after I did my final interview. So it did make me feel like, wow, like this organization really wants me to be a part of the team. And the tight timeline kind of also communicated that to me, which is kind of conflicting messages almost of like, we really want you, but we also want you to make a decision really, really quickly. So there's kind of two parts of the coin there, that I would say are two different ways of looking at it.
Yeah,
And I
that is
think there's a
interesting.
difference too of if it's March or April and you're hiring somebody to start in May or June, okay, you don't give them weeks. But if it's August or September before the next May, June, or July, there's a little bit different. So I think it also depends on when you're hiring too, of what that turnaround can look like.
Yeah, that's a great point. So one of the things that has been so interesting for me is that we did a survey with some of our scholars, both rising seniors as well as those that had graduated. And we talked about, from an internship perspective, how many of them actually accepted the position with the company after their internship experience. And I was a little bit floored by the data that we got, or the feedback that we got, that 60% did not accept the position with the company that they had interned with, which I never would have expected that. I was so surprised by that. And so I'd like to talk a little bit more like now about, so how can students ensure, first of all, that the internships that they're looking for lead to some type of mutually beneficial opportunity? And then vice versa, how can companies do this when they're recruiting? Mary, how about we start with you?
Sure. So actually, a thought that you just triggered when you recapped that for me was that, the advice we've given to companies is to really think of it more like a boomerang approach. Like, don't worry. Like, you think of your strategy, but if you had someone intern with you and you really liked them and you thought that they were going to stick, and they didn't, things are more fluid now, and they could go somewhere for 2 years, and through staying in touch and, just being part of this ecosystem and connectedness, if 2 years later that you're still reaching back out to them and they're like, like, things will change with your company and things will change with them. So I would say that that's a big piece of it, is knowing how you can adjust your message, knowing really, like, really getting to know them to understand what about the role didn't resonate with them. Was it the manager? People don't leave a company, they leave a manager. So maybe there's internal coaching that you're ramping up and doing. So I think that there's a lot of this. Yalen and Reagan both talked about, that intersection of values of the company and the goals and how it resonates with them. I think that piece to it often gets underplayed, but that is what makes people want to work there, right? For me personally, that's the thing. I'm sure, like, that's the research shows that too. So
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you for that. And Stephanie, I know you talked a little bit already about companies and their talent strategy, but I'd like to just go and lean in a little bit more and get a little bit more specific about what you're seeing as far as missed opportunities, other best practices that we can share with the companies today.
Well, I think a new wrinkle that has come into the whole internship discussion is that it's not just for juniors anymore. There are plenty of freshmen and sophomores that are also doing internships. I know here at University of Arkansas, it is not uncommon for students to graduate with 3, 4, or 5 internships. Well,
Yeah.
if they've had that many experiences, and a lot of times they're doing it all with different companies. A lot of times they're doing it during the school year while they're going to class. And it's great for them in terms of building a lot of experiences and learning a lot about different companies, different parts of the supply chain. That's always a struggle for students to figure out. There's this big, broad world of supply chain management out there. How do I know what part I really want to be in? And I know on the faculty, side or university side, we want them to explore and find out what fits. So sometimes when there's not those connections, it's not that there was a bad experience. It was hey, I feel like something's a better fit. And when you've had multiple options, then you can look at a whole like appetizer platter of possibilities and then pick a more informed, potentially, decision. So I think companies need to rethink, are we just going to stick with just juniors the summer after their junior year before their senior year, because that's our pipeline? Are we willing to open it up to other ages who may not have had as many classes, may not have as much knowledge, but maybe we can get them early and maybe they stick with us? Or it's somebody that we're like, hey, let's just kind of test it out and see where this goes. That there's a lot going on there. There's a lot of nuances when you're dealing with students of where do they want to be after college, geographically, or, saying I'm geographically flexible. Some of them mean, well, I'm geographically flexible as long as it's a 100-mile radius of, my hometown. And so you're having to figure that life changes. People may get married, they may move somewhere with a partner, or they're trying to balance careers. So a lot of it goes into, and that's stuff companies can't manage, but it is understanding there's probably a percentage we're not going to land, but there's probably a big percentage that we can land. And how do we create the best opportunity without making it like Disneyland every day? Because I feel like that's one of the problems that some companies have run into, is they create really, really fun internship experiences. The kids have a great time. And then they start their job and they go, wait, I don't get lunch with the CEO like every Thursday, but I did that during an internship. Or we're not going to go play top golf, or whatever it is. And so how do you, going back to that culture, going back to that, what is my job going to be? How do you show, yes, let's have some fun, connect, bonding, but how do you show what is the day-to-day going to look like? And as Jalen mentioned, having an idea of what a career is going to look like to be able to have those conversations.
So Stephanie, it's funny because it's not just at University of Arkansas where we're seeing, when we work with what, 75 of the top supply chain universities through the Awesomes scholarship program. And when I look at these resumes, these amazing students have 4 years, right? Like they started their freshman year of having internships and working with different companies. So to Mary's point, which was great, keep those contacts and those communications going. And even if a student says, this isn't right for me right now, keeping that communication is really critical, because you're right. It may not be the right fit right now, but that doesn't mean that it's not the right fit further down the road. And, I'm just sitting here thinking, that is a golden piece of nugget of advice that I think everybody should really think about. And also to your point, Stephanie, earlier about getting internship opportunities across the entire supply chain spectrum so that they can understand how does it all work together. Like they're hearing things in theory in classes, but they want to see and experience it in practicality through these internships opportunities. And Yalen, I'd like to talk more about that, because that was one of the things that you really stressed when we were prepping for this, that I really appreciated. And I think that, others need to hear that perspective of, you want it to be fun, but you also want it to be meaningful. So let's talk about that a little bit.
Yeah, no, I agree. And you can have the best leader, but is it the work that you want to be doing? And is it the work that you want to be doing, but it's probably not the right person fit? And so I think an awesome solve for this is really making sure that your interns, or when you're interviewing, you're not just talking to recruiters, you're talking to people that are in the field, people not necessarily in the role that you are interviewing for, but most likely just speaking towards like their career journey within the company. And so I think that's a really important part of making sure that you're just not siloed and you're like, okay, I'm going to be here and this is what I'm going to be doing. You have to make sure that it's flexible, because that's what we're doing. We're deciding, like, do we want to move? Do we want this? Do we want to maybe take a pay cut to be where I want to be? Do I want to be in this area of supply chain? I think within an organization, the supply chain, there's various, it's vast. You could be doing logistics, you could be doing operations. Within a company, how easy is it to make an important part of the equation that I'm not sure is really talked about in the interview or process.
And Yalen, when we were talking earlier too, one of the things that you talked about that resonated with me was wanting to make sure that the work that you're doing has an impact, right? So
Yeah.
as we're thinking about shaping up internships and the experiences and the project work, like I would just love to hear a little bit more about your experience and how that worked for you.
Yeah, I think when I was looking for my role out of college, I had one mission. I said, I just want to be able to see the impact that I'm able to make and what I want my career to look like. So that meant moving all the way from Colorado to Minnesota to be at the company that I'm currently with, and not at the company that was, 20-minute drive from my parents' house. And so really, as you're interviewing, right, this conversation is directed towards companies, but also within students that are interviewing, like what do you want your career to look like, and how can you seek out those conversations? And also, as you are recruiting and talking to students, making sure that you're valuing that aspect of their experience.
Very good. So I love that, right? So be very conscientious and very thoughtful about the projects that you put these internships on so that they can connect the work, they can get real life experience that's just going to help them with their education, but also help your company actually get some stuff done with these smart people that are they're hungry for work, right? Like they want to take what they've learned and apply it. And earlier on, Reagan, we talked a little bit, you had mentioned about the importance of the leaders that are managing and the people aspect of it. So maybe share a little bit more of your thoughts or your experiences around the criticality of making sure the people who are managing these interns, like what does success look like?
Yeah, so I think something to kind of call out here is with the internship, yes, like it's the company that's trying to kind of gauge if you're a fit for long term with the organization, but it's also kind of the students' trial run as well to really try on the company too. So I think something that's not really talked about enough is the importance of the people leader that you have overseeing those interns. That is their first glance into the company culture, the organization. So it's really important that you're pairing them with someone who is going to make time for them, who will develop them. And to Yalen's point, will also paint a picture for them of what does career growth at this company look like. I've heard from some of my colleagues that they didn't have the best experiences with their people managers, and that was a huge factor into their decision to not return to the organization that they interned with. So it's really, really important that that first person that they're in close contact with is a key developer and key person in their space to allocate time and resources towards them.
Well, Michelle, I think that's extremely important as they're starting a job too, not just, so yes, we're talking about internships, and I know we're going to get into more of that in session 2, but I think there's a link there of that first individual, whether it's at an internship or when you start that entry-level job, that's kind of like your go-to person or your manager or developer or mentor, whatever it is critical for keeping them.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, and we're talking about internships in this question, but this session today is really around recruiting at any point, right? So I think that's a great point. And I just lost my train of thought of what I was going to say.
Michelle, I did want to add on to something that Mary said earlier, when she talked about staying in contact with interns that may have made the decision to not accept their return offers. Something that both my internships did is they did do exit interviews. So it gave me the opportunity to say, like, what did I feel like went well with the internship? What are some areas for improvement? So whether that's kind of baked into the internship already, or if that's something that the company needs to like reach out to for input afterwards, I think that's really helpful for the organization side to really understand how can we continue to evolve our internship programs into making sure that we're not continuing to lose interns for some of the same reasons. You know, are there any trends for why people aren't coming back, and how do we kind of tackle those internally?
Yeah, no, that's a great point. Exit interviews are really important, but making sure that you actually do something with it is the critical point, right? Like, so having that be part of your talent strategy, if you're going to invest in these internships, then invest in the feedback that you're going to get to make it better, right? And you know, I would just encourage all of our senior leaders to not delegate that, because I think that that is such an important piece of feedback that you never want to get it watered down. And so I would just say make that a top priority as a leader to get that information and that feedback that you can then go and assess how you're doing and make adjustments as needed.
Well, Michelle, I think on that too, have the people that worked with the interns do some of that feedback as well. So
Right.
we did recruiting, we brought these people on. Were these interns a good fit? How do we approach it and recruit them? What universities did we go to? What skill sets were we looking for? And were they successful? So I think that should, especially if you're talking the senior like kind of strategy of how we're approaching this,
Right.
you need to get both of those sides too, because if you keep recruiting the same way, even if you've got the student feedback, if you haven't looked internally and said, okay, from our side, are we pulling the right people in the door to begin with? That's an important piece to think about as well.
Absolutely.
I mean, it really, oh, I'm gonna jump in because y'all got me excited about like a passion project of mine is, you know, it's kind of like applying a Deming approach to like supply chain recruitment. There's metrics that you can follow, and then you continually like refresh and like look at, are we measuring the right things? Is this really telling us something valuable about who we're retaining? So I mean, we use this in operations when I was in supply chain. It applies the same. I think it really does point to the fact that as a practitioner, sometimes we get exhausted and we delegate these things to the experts in what would be considered HR, but they may not know our conversion statistics as well as we do, or they may not know the barriers. And then I do think, Reagan, you brought up a good point, but I do think that there's a bias to exit interviews where you don't really want to say why you left. And so I think a lot of times it can be that it has to be through relationship and through more of an understanding about it's totally okay where you are at. Like if this wasn't the right fit for you, that is totally great. And that's only really going to come from a trusted relationship. And that's probably not going to be the content that you get in an exit interview. So you have to build some mechanism in your recruiting strategy to get more truthful, honest feedback that you can then adjust to.
So Mary, give me the top 3 metrics that you think are the most effective to measure your organization's ability to recruit top talent.
Oh, wow. Put me on the spot.
I know.
I know. I mean, I'm going back to like what we used, and it was retention. Like, actually, I don't mean to like tease part 2 of this conversation, but it was more about, we could recruit a ton of people because we had great brand awareness. And so everybody wanted to work for the companies I was with. But did we retain the people that we wanted? That was really the metric that we followed. And then if we lost them, that's where it becomes more of a Deming approach. If we lost high quality talent, why? Like, what was it? And everybody always wants to use the excuse that it's for a personal family reason. You will see that on like 99% of the things you get back from, why did we lose this great A player? Oh, family. Well, no, not really.
Right. Yeah.
So dig deeper. You have to dig deeper in your own data and trend around a manager. People tell you who they are by the results they're showing. So
very true. So one of the other things I want to ask you back in the line of recruiting, right? And thinking about putting your best foot forward to get the talent to come to your organization. Who should you send to do that work? Who wants to answer that one? Because I get a lot of great snippets of information from different leaders and scholars that we work with. And it's always so interesting to me that people don't pay enough attention to who's showing up to represent to attract the talent. So who wants to go first on that one? Reagan, you're smiling pretty big. I feel like you got something to say here.
I do, but I feel like my answer might differ from some people.
That's good. We want differing opinions.
Yeah, I mean, I think for me, like, it was always nice when it was alumni from my school that now work at that organization, that were coming and speaking to me. That was always good because it felt like they could connect to me on a different level than other people might be able to. And it was like, oh, well, they went to the same institution as me, and they ended up going to that company. So, I it kind of depends, I think, though, because I'm a recent graduate, so I think that strikes more of a chord with me. But if we're looking past internships and we're looking at full-time roles, I think if you're sending someone with more of a leadership role in your organization, that speaks more volumes to me, that like they really want to make sure they're recruiting the right people. If they're sending like I don't know, director of this organization to come and recruit for a role that's specifically under their team, that to me shows them that they really value that position, and they're really looking to pinpoint the right person for that role.
That's a great insight. Yalen, do you want to add?
No, I completely agree. I think it's alum, it's professors, friends that are with the company that, people they've developed great relationships with, coming in to be a guest professor for a lecture. And I would say like any age. My roommate, my friend Lauren Cosper, she was a guest professor for CSU. And it was just so awesome that she was able to share her experience at Target. Even though it had only been, it's only been a couple years, but she was able to, I think, really connect with students and show them what a company at a different state looks like. And I also think if you have leaders at the company too, being able to share their experience and they're able to speak to company culture, I think that really resonates with students as well.
You bring up such a great point, and I'm glad that you did, around opportunities for leaders in companies to go and speak at universities. And I know with both University of Tennessee and University of Arkansas and other universities that I work with, they're always saying, come talk to our class. Like, we would love for somebody to come in. So that would be another thing I would encourage our awesome leaders to think about, is tapping into those universities that you're recruiting at and sending people just to go and speak to classes. Professors are always welcoming, these corporate leaders to come in and talk with the class. So let's just talk a little bit more about that with Stephanie and Mary. So when we're thinking about how you're making the connections, talk to me a little bit more about how companies are coming to you to talk about creating more connections with academia and their corporate worlds. And Stephanie, let's start with you.
So a lot of universities have a lot of companies coming and trying to get access. And
Mhm.
so being creative in how you might want to get your foot in the door. So there's the traditional career fairs and supply chain focused events and things like that. But a lot of us are exploring different ways to connect that are perhaps more meaningful. If you just want to go into a class and do the HR pitch, it's not worth your time. It doesn't, the students don't get anything out of it. In fact, they're just glad they can just check out for the however long that you're standing there. But if you go in and say, hey, here's a supply chain issue that we're currently dealing with, and if you've worked with the faculty so it ties in with something that they're dealing with in the class, that's much more impactful and gets students much more engaged. I know a lot of universities will have project-based classes where
Mhm.
as an industry partner, think of it as like a mini internship project where you can work with a small group at that university and give them a project and they spend a semester working on it, and somebody at your company connects with them on a regular basis. I think it's really smart. One of the things we haven't really talked about yet is there are amazing supply chain programs across the country. I know faculty at a lot of programs that are doing great things and they're training the next generation at impressive levels. You can't just find the top talent at one university.
Right.
There's lots of places to go. So it's stepping back and going, okay, geographically, what makes sense in terms of the skills that that university tends to prepare their students for, what makes sense. Where have we had success? I've had companies come in and go, hey, we've gone here, but for 4 years we didn't find anybody, so we quit going there. Okay, that's not the right fit. From the financial component, what are you willing to pay versus other companies that are going to be there, and figuring out what's the priority of what university and that student population is the best fit with the roles that we have available. You're going to be a lot more successful when that matches up. And not every university is going to be a home run. And so it's really sitting down, and you have to be thoughtful about this, because I'll say it at Arkansas, we're extremely fortunate because we have several very large companies headquartered in our backyard, along with a lot of their supplier friends and technology friends and transportation friends and stuff. So there's a ton of competition within like 30 minutes of our campus. There's a lot of other universities that don't have that right there.
Mhm.
Maybe you're better served to try them and somebody else. Now, if my if some people in my university are going to tell me that's not the right way to
You're
say
not
that,
promoting your university enough.
you can find, but what I say is, what is top talent to you?
Right.
Because maybe top talent isn't the 4.0 student that's been involved on campus. Maybe it's the student that has more like a 3.2, but they've been working to put their way through school and they have some grit and a chip on their shoulder, and they're going to work hard for you in a way that maybe this other student wouldn't. Okay, go
Mhm.
for them. And so
Mhm.
figuring that out, and it's different.
Yeah. Mary, I just want to give you an opportunity to speak to this, and I have a follow-up question for the two of you.
Okay, I'm going to jump on that I agree with all of that. And I love the idea of the projects class. That's a course that I teach too. And I've just seen such great things with that, with companies who have huge brand awareness. You would think they don't even need to do a project, but they love it because it gives them an opportunity to give like one of their really rising talent, like a Reagan or a Yalen. They let them run the project with this remote group of students. They learn these valuable skills of like, wow, they are really high maintenance, those kids, you know.
Mhm.
And yet it isn't like internal to the company. They may not have an opportunity internally to manage a team, but through a semester long project, you get a chance to manage a team. And so I've seen companies use the project classes like that, where they can expand and develop internal rising talent. They can assess potential incoming talent. And it's brand awareness. They build like, hey, to Stephanie's point, this is a real life problem we've got. It makes their company seem so much more real. So the students who are in that class, those are typically really small classes. They tend to love that because they feel like what Yalen and Reagan were talking about earlier, they feel like they're actually making a difference. Like this is a company who they said they have this problem and we're helping with the problem.
Right.
Like it's much different than taking a course where you're learning more of the theory and not getting a chance to apply it.
Yeah, I love that. That's fantastic. Everybody wins, it sounds like, in that situation,
Yeah.
right? Because the students win by having something meaty to sink their teeth into and to learn from, and the companies win because it's another resource that they have access to for new ideas. So I just think that that's so great. And I'm seeing more and more universities having those types of programs for companies to engage in, which is exciting as well. And, you know, I was hoping to have the stat and I don't, but I'm going to put it in one of our alerts about just how many universities are growing their supply chain programs. And, you know, we talked a little bit about different universities kind of have maybe more uniqueness and they focus on this part of the supply chain versus this. So if I'm a leader out there, what are some references that I can go to learn about universities and maybe where they have a little bit more of an emphasis that I can align with my strategy with versus others? Do you guys have any suggestions on resources of where companies can go to look for that type of data for universities?
I think rankings is a place to start.
Okay.
I don't know that that's the best. If you develop faculty relationships at different universities, like I've had, you know, pretty straightforward conversations with companies before and said, hey, you know, these companies tend to focus more on X because of this reason, or these universities tend to focus more on Y. What are potentially your options? But I feel like more universities are trying to do more end to end because they're realizing that that's the demand from companies out there. So even if there's traditionally been, you know, we've a lot of times here at Arkansas been retail and transportation focused. We've also hired a number of faculty to focus more on sourcing and operations and some of those other things to have more of an end-to-end type of curriculum that we've developed. And I don't think that's unique amongst a lot of other universities as well. Mary, what do you think?
I'd say like this is more not an academic hat. I'm a pracademic, so remember that. You know,
I love
everything
that.
I say is like that. So, like as a practitioner, the way I would try to like read these tea leaves on the universities was where does the supply chain function, like the supply chain programs, where do they report through? So, like if it's supply chain isn't a standalone department, then that's not probably end to end. And if my needs are more an end-to-end scope, then I'm probably not going to get that from a small school where the supply chain is grouped with marketing. Like it just, and I don't know that that's right, but that was the way we looked at it, was what were we looking for? If what we were going for was procurement talent, you know, it's pretty easy to look, as Stephanie said, at rankings and say, you know, where are the best procurement programs? So like there's not a cookie cutter approach to it, because this is the great thing about these connections with universities and practitioners is that these programs evolve. And to your point, Michelle, they're growing. You know, supply chain is a growing field. It's a over $40 trillion global business. And there are so many opportunities available, and it keeps changing. So we're in a really exciting space, and that makes it a little harder to navigate it. But
yeah.
That's why these webinars are important.
Exactly. You know, I saw a stat somewhere that 40% of all of the global jobs are connected to supply chain. I mean, that's huge, right? Like, so it is an exciting time to be in supply chain.
Yeah, I'll throw out one more, because I know you love stats. One more really great one is over 92% of the people, the young people who come into supply chain, 3 years later, they would still recommend supply chain to a friend. Like,
that's a great
so
stat.
you enter it and you're like, hey, yeah, I don't love this job, but I think it was like Yale, and I think you said, the skills build on each other. You can go, okay, yeah, I don't love it here in procurement, but like maybe I love it in logistics. So that's always a cool thing too.
Very cool.
And more students are coming into college campuses already primed that they're going to major in supply chain. And that is a huge shift from
Yeah.
5 years.
Right.
A lot of that is COVID, but a lot of it is we're getting a lot of generational interest, and there's just a lot more awareness too. And I think there's a lot more of parents going, this is a place you can find a career and have a job and not come home and live in our basement.
Right.
and it pays too. Those internships, they pay pretty well. Michelle and I were talking about, I think we worked for free for internships.
Exactly. We just wanted the experience. We needed to pass that resume, man.
Good for you guys is all I've got to say.
Yeah.
Kaylin.
So some of the questions that we've been getting from the audience are around, thinking about it. If I'm not a Fortune 100 company, if I'm a mid-sized company, how can I compete for top talent? And so Reagan, I want to talk to you about that and just hear your perspective, because you've had a couple of different internships with different size organizations. So can you share with your thoughts on that?
Yeah, so kind of what Yalen was talking about earlier of wanting to get different experiences through different internships. Something that I was trying to figure out for myself is, do I want to work at a very large organization, or do I want to be at a more mid to small sized organization? What really drew me in to intern with a mid to small sized organization was that they did have one of those preview shadowing day opportunities where I did get to sit with someone in the demand planning department and learn about what they do within their role. But I also got to meet like the head of sales and marketing, and a lot of other key figures in the business that came in and spoke to me, which I don't know necessarily would have been the case at a larger organization. So I think they did a really good job of showcasing kind of the family atmosphere that a mid to smaller sized organization can provide you with. And so I would say if you are a more mid to small sized organization, that is a huge kind of benefit or perk that you can definitely leverage when you're recruiting with students, and kind of bring that into your recruiting approach. Like, be able to showcase how different functions really have strong, close relationships with each other, because I think that's something that's very unique to those kind of organizations versus very large corporations.
Excellent. Well, we are quickly closing out on the hour. I told you guys, this is why we have to do multiple series, because there's so much content to have here. So I'm just going to ask one final question, 15 seconds or less response. What is the most important thing for organizations to know about this next generation of talent? Like, what is some like hidden golden nugget that they need to know about? I'm going to start with my amazing professionals. So Yalen, why don't you kick us off?
I think I would boil it down, and even this entire conversation, to what does success look like in my company, and how can I make that super transparent to the talent, and that's how you will get the people that are meant to be at your company.
Wonderful. Reagan, how about you?
I would just kind of piggyback off of that, and I would say, what does the future of my organization look like? Because something that I think Yalen and I and other people in our generation are looking for is continuous development, continuous learning. So how do you kind of provide that as an organization when you're trying to recruit these individuals?
Excellent. Mary?
I'd say all of that. And that I mean, really what I hear a lot is the question, how can I make a meaningful difference? So if you can answer that with them, that this is a way to contribute and it makes a meaningful difference in the world, in our company, for you personally, for your family, then that's a great place to be.
Great. And Stephanie?
So I'll summarize kind of what everybody said. They care, they want to make a difference. And then I'm going to throw, this is more tactical, but it has become a big topic of conversation. They do not want to work remote.
Great point. Excellent point. And we're going to dive into that next time in part 2 about how do we work on retaining the talent once we get them. So first of all, I just want to say what an amazing, engaging, and thought-provoking discussion that we had today. You know, the depth and insight and breadth of the ideas that you all shared really do help to illuminate the complexities and the opportunities that we have of attracting talent in our supply chain industry. And I just want to say my heartfelt thanks to Stephanie, Mary, Reagan, and Yalen for sharing your insights and lessons learned. I really do think that your contributions are really important and really helped enrich our conversation today. And to everyone who joined us, thank you for your active participation and your questions. And we look forward to your involvement in the next round. You know, we really appreciate you being interested in this important conversation, and hopefully you are able to take away some really significant nuggets of how you think about your company's strategies, what you're doing well, and maybe you learn some new things that you want to try out. So remember, our journey isn't over yet. Please join us for part 2 of our series, which is scheduled again for Monday, October 21st at noon Central. And there we're going to go in deeper into the strategies around retention. So we look forward to seeing you all there. And once again, thank you and have a wonderful rest of your day. Take care.
Thank you all.
Thank you.
Thanks.